Hello, Brick Sculptors. Welcome back to Brick Sculpt. This is Chris, and I have a interesting problem for you today. In a new installment of Help Me Brick Sculpt, I got a message from a fan named Travis. Travis wrote me and said, I've been very inspired by your videos on the sugar grid stuff. Thank you. My city is entirely MILS plated, and I'm soon expanding into a medieval section. I have looked all over the internet and found no good way to stick one of the newer castle builds, Lion Knights or BDP, I believe that's Bricklink Designer Program, to the MILS plate because of all the nonlinear plates on the bottom. Is there some combo or even just normal sugar grid that can accommodate this? Would you need to change the size of grid based on wedge pieces used on the base? Thanks for the great videos, Travis. Well, thank you, Travis. I was very intrigued by this and decided I would try to take it on. So first thing I did was I asked Travis if he could send me a picture or a studio file of the base of the Lion Knights castle. And he spent some time on it and came back at me with this. Now, when I got this email, I nearly crapped my pants. And that is a heck of a shape. Holy cow, how are you going to get that to stick down to a base plate? And so I nearly gave up, but figured I have an afternoon to kill. I'm off work today. Let's see what we can figure out. Now, before I got too deep into this, I knew that this picture was not going to be helpful enough. I needed to go deeper than that. So I referred to the Lion Knights castle that I don't own. Unfortunately, a $400 set to make a MILS plate is just not going to happen for me. As much as I'd love to waste my money on that, I'm not doing it today. But I did, however, find on eBay somebody was selling the battle damaged version for only $200. Oh wait, it's not complete. Hold on. Got a few finishing touches to add here. There we go. That's what it looks like after the siege. Well, anyway, moving on. I slapped this thing together. Oh, forgot a piece here. Let's get that back on there. And now I had a working shape that I can model off of. It's not pretty by any means. It's a little bit prettier if I flip it over. And you can see the craziness we have to work with here. Now, as nuts as this shape looks, and as difficult as this looks like it's going to be, it's actually not as bad as I thought. Because in looking at it in this view, there's really only 3 different orientations of studs. One orientation, which is going to be this side here and this front portion. The second orientation, the middle portion. And the third, right here. Now this is built in 6 chunks. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Now these are made to open to show the inside of the castle. But I decided, okay, if I can work with this in only 3 different orientations of studs, I might be able to come up with something to make this attached to a MILS plate. First thing I wanted to do was label them. So I called this section A, this B, and this C. Now, why is it in reverse order? Well, this is where the portcullis goes. So this is kind of the main section of the castle, the middle, and then the other side here. So this is kind of the focal point, the front of the castle being right here. So at first I thought the orientation should be like this. Now this caused some problems. If I was going to put this on a sugar grid, this could fit in standard grid, but then I have this angle here. And this angle looks basically like this. It's 2 of these wedge plates facing outward of each other. It's about 20-ish degrees, I think a little bit less. And so I would need to find a sugar grid that could rotate this about 20 degrees. Now, with sugar grids, it has to be exact or it's not going to work, which is real tricky. You also have this technique used over here where they use the ball and socket mixable joint type as well, but these are actually the exact same angle. These lay right over the top of each other. They're exact same angle. So basically I would need standard grid, different sugar grid for this, and different sugar grid for that. So roughly 20 degrees askew and then 40 degrees askew if we double the angle. And that just didn't seem practical. Now, this was way beyond my mathematical ability, so I consulted one of the great minds of Brick Sculpt who I go to when I have troubles, and that is Mr. Luca Herman. Luca's helped me with a lot of different projects. He helped me with the original obelisk, and so I just hit him a message today and said, hey, What do you think? How would you make a sugar grid for this? And he did a bunch of math and he came back with this. Now it's not ideal and it does use jumper plates. We got 2x2s and 1x2s and some individual studs, and they are far spaced out. I didn't even test it because the connection points are going to be minimal. I have faith that it will work, but I don't think it's ideal. You're going to have only a couple of studs holding each of these sections on, and it's really not an ideal setup. So I decided to scrap the sugar grids altogether. Now, there may be a way to do sugar grids with double stack sugar grids, so you can get different angles and you can make this a little tighter. But like I said, it has to be exact, and that is tricky. The other thing is if you do it in a sugar grid, if you put it in a MILS plate, you have to use angles to get all of these back to standard grid, which is going to be near impossible with how crazy this shape is all the way around the outside of this castle. So sugar grid out, we're moving on. So the next thing I realized is, okay, let's break this down. Maybe we should use this as the center, B. Because then we only have to go 20 degrees in each direction. We're not doubling it. And this will still kind of be in the front here. It'll be kind of cool. It'll be off center. So I said I was going to build off of B here. And instead of to have two angles here, so I just need to angle two sections out from B. And the approach I came up with looks like this. When you have this hinge setup, every 5 studs you can make a connection. For example, I could put another hinge right here and have 5 in between, and that means the next row here would also fit a hinge. So if I could make a couple of layers that would overlay onto this, 5 apart, I could then use these hinges to branch out from the center here. And that was the approach I was going to run with. So I made these 2 pieces here, and then I need to make some arms to support the sides. Now after a lot of back and forth, I created these 2 sections here. And this is just a bunch of plates stacked up. And these are just going to clip right into here. Now this middle section is going to be in normal grid. So we're going to have that actually lower. The rest is going to have to float over tile. Now most people I've seen that have attached one of these to a base plate have just done so in one section and floated the rest of it over tile. That is definitely a solution, but not a very strong one. I wanted something better than that, and I think we achieved something a lot better than that. So then we come up with this shape here, which should overlay beautifully and fit the grid the whole way through this. Now I just have to get that attached to a base plate, and then I also need to get this back to grid, or at least something I can use to attach to grid. So I made these end pieces here, which basically, as long as you keep these lengths the same, this same 5 stud difference will work here, and we can get it back to straight on the 2 ends. Now this portion will not be in grid, but I'll show you how we're going to attach that later. And it will give us something to attach back to a normal grid. So that's going to be the foundation of this castle and how we're going to attach it to a MILS plate. Now let's talk about size. This thing is obviously quite big and quite awkward with how many little pieces it has, and of course you have these hinges here. So my thought was, we're going to start with these folded in, and that's the size that I need to fit on a base plate. Okay, but then I'd like to be able to have these fold out so you can still access the inside of the castle, and those might hang over. So the size I came up with was this. 2 32 by 32s and 2 16 by 32s. That was the perfect size to fit this castle on there. And then we were going to take the B section and center it right in the middle. Now I know what you're going to say, and I've thought about this. Now our front portion is off center, and it definitely is. But I do think this is the best orientation because in doing it this way, it will give you a nice focal point right here in this corner, but also the side will look nice. But when we fold our sides out, having that B section centered also allows us to have these hang over pretty much equally on each side. If you had it centered more this way, this would hang over really far and this would not. So I think this is the best solution, and I'm going to show you kind of how we're going to build this into a MILS plate here. Now, to save you some time from watching me click all this stuff together, I already built the MILS plate. This is the same size. This is going to be 48 by 64 studs. And this is all MILS, all through here, and I just left this open section. Now, these tiles are kind of ugly in here. You could fill that whole thing with tile if you want, minus the points that we're going to connect to. But this will work really well for what we're going to do here with this piece we created. Now that I've created this, I can sink this down in the middle here and attach it to the base. Having this lower, and then these two sections will just float right over the tile. So now that that's down in there, we need to attach the ends because these are still floppy. And the connection points are going to be a little tricky because we're out of grid here. This part's in grid, the rest of this is floating, and this is back to straight, but it's not in grid, so it's not just going to stick down. We need to get creative there. The way I decided to do that is this. I took turntables, 2 of them on each side, and put them just like that. And then I made these little pieces here. And what these are is just a 1x3 with round sides and a couple of tiles on top to kind of stay out of the way and allow this to pivot. And then I can stick these underneath here, attach them to our turntable, and lock it in. Now you're probably saying, well, that's a super weak connection. And you would be correct. But don't worry, it gets better. So yes, this is a super weak connection. It's only connected by 2 little studs on these arms. This is definitely going to pull right off. Except one of my favorite techniques in Lego is connecting by limiting movement. So what we're going to do here is simply take a nice large plate, stick it right over the top. So even though it might be a weak connection underneath, I can now lift the whole base plate with that because nothing can pull out on the side. Pretty cool. Now, we've got a nice start here, but we need to build this up. So we're still going to have to use a good deal of tile because the outside of this castle is all jagged pieces. And in order to get this to lay flat, we're pretty much going to take this MILS and we're going to tile this entire thing, which I'm not going to do on video because I don't have the time, patience, or parts to do that, but you can use your imagination for that portion. What I will, however, do is show you how to get to that point. First thing we do is fill the center, because this portion of the castle will be in grid. So we can just fill this with normal bricks to build it up. We can then come in and build this up with some plates. And so that basically fits right into grid. Next thing we got to do is build it 1 layer higher because we're going to float the whole front and back over tile. And that'll look something like this. Now we need to build up these sections as well because this is flush right now with the top of the MILS plate. So we need to raise these up so we can put the castle right on top. And here we can get creative. You can make as many connection points as you want to that base. It just depends how hard or easy you want it to be able to take off. And I'm just going to run some plates along the top here, just kind of staggering them to get good connection to the base of the battle damaged castle. There's one side. It doesn't have to look beautiful because you're not going to particularly see this, but the more you do on this, the more solid connection you're going to have. Ideally, if this is done right, you should be able to pick up the base by the castle and not have it fall off. But since I don't have a Lion Knight's castle, or $400 for one, I'm not going to be testing that today. All right, so this is ready to stick the castle on it now. Now, we have to also remember, we have other sections here. So this is going to support, A, B, and C. And we have to basically take our hinges here and set them right over the hinges underneath to make this work properly. And it's a lot of plate-on-plate sticking, but this whole thing will now stick down in system and attach beautifully to a MILS plate. Now these back sections are going to float, and what I would do if this were the actual castle, I would tile all the way around all of this. If you're going to put a moat, you can put water and just tile waters under there, grass, and then of course you can do studs once you're outside of this edge. But this back section I would tile up so that these will still rotate open, and you can display it open, get to the inside, or close it up and have it displayed like that. And it is a little bit off center, but again, when these are open, pretty nice and centered. So that's the way I would do it. You could always shift it over if you wanted to. I should also mention this front section here is in grid. So you could definitely take a nice big piece of plate, stick it under there, and get a really firm connection on that as well. This portion would float on tiles unless you wanted to extend this down, but I don't know if that's just necessary. You should be able to lift the whole thing by the castle once you have it stuck down like this. It's incredibly solid. So let me know what you think of my solution. I'll tell you what, I'll make a deal with you guys. If this video gets 30,000 views and 2,000 likes, I will build this in studio and post it on Rebrickable free of charge, just the base, of course. So you guys can do this with your own Lion Knight's castles and not have to just look at this video 1,000 times. I'll go even one step further. If this video gets 100,000 views, I will spend the $400+ and buy a Lion Knight's castle to put it on a base. Well, if you guys have any questions, please leave them below. If you like this video, please like and subscribe. That's all I got for this time, and we will see you next time.